Hello, Elisa here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my relatively new series, Learn to Read Tarot with me. This is episode number 2. I'm hoping this is going to continue to be an ongoing thing, provided everybody is still enjoying it and it's providing some value. Let me tell you how it works. So this series was actually sort of born from some live chat discussions we had when I hosted my Tarot with Training Wheels series, which if you haven't seen yet, that is where I recommend you begin. If you are brand spanking new to tarot, that will give you a jumping off point. You can learn the meanings of all 78 of the tarot cards, and you can learn meanings that you personally sort of jive with, that makes sense for you. That's the whole point. That gives you a real solid sort of foundation to then begin to work with the cards on an ongoing and regular basis. If you want to go even deeper than Tarot with Training Wheels, I recommend my website course, which is called Tarot Bootcamp for Beginners. I will have links to both of those things in the description box down below. Tarot with Training Wheels happens right here on YouTube. It's, I think, about 10 episodes long, and it is completely free. And again, it's just meant to really get you started. But in this series, the whole point is that we want to now start to do some practical applications with the cards. So we want to work with the cards, we want to do some readings, we want to sort of string things together, look at combinations, look at different decks and how to interpret them and all that good stuff. So with all of that introductory mumbo jumbo out of the way, welcome to my reading table. Let's get started. So I took a bunch of requests after the last episode and for decks, for spreads, for things you guys want to see me do in this series. And I had some requests for the Wild Unknown Tarot, which I think this is such a great one because I think it's a deck that can be really intimidating to a beginner, but I think it also has an awful lot to offer. And I think if you can build a relationship with a deck like this, whether it's this deck or something similar, it can really build your confidence when it comes to learning the tarot meanings. So I thought I would work with this deck today, and what I'm going to do is share with you my favorite 3-card spread. Now, if you've been watching my channel for a while, it won't be any surprise to you what spread that is, but for those of you who might be just stumbling on this video or on this channel, my favorite 3-card spread for a general tarot reading is Energy, Obstacle, and Advice. So that is the spread we're going to be doing with the Wild Unknown Tarot today. So first, let's take a quick look at the cards so you can get an idea of what I mean when I say that this one can be challenging for beginners. So you have these scenes, which are, if you look closely, I think actually tell you a lot. Some of them have more happening than others. For example, we have these 3 birds getting together with this 3 of Cups. That does make sense to me for the meaning of the card, but I can see how it could be challenging. Here's one that's a little bit more ambiguous. We have 3 pentacle signs and this big sort of mountain. Like, huh? But over time, if you build a relationship, and I think this is true of working with any deck, if you work with any deck consistently for a period of time, I think you'll find that it starts to take on a lot more depth and a lot more meaning. And this is one of the things that's tricky for those of us who really enjoy working with a variety of decks, is sometimes we miss out on the opportunity to sort of build that depth. But that's what I think is the gift of really sitting with and working with the same deck, whether it is the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the Thoth deck, the Marseille deck, a wildly popular kind of deck like this one where it just kind of took the world by storm for a while. Whatever it is, I think it's useful to take the time to get to know a deck at some point in your practice. That's just my personal preference. That's something that I found really, really helped me. But the Wild Unknown, I think, really changed the conversation around tarot. It's a wonderful, wonderful deck. And I think it gives more than meets the eye. But I think it's one that would be fun to go through in this series. So we're going to use this for my Energy, Obstacle, Advice spread. Now, before we get into the actual spread, a word about reversals. So some readers like to shuffle their cards. So they'll take the deck and they'll split it, and they'll flip one pile over like this so that when they shuffle, and I'm not going to do it because it's going to do it to me, but when they shuffle, then some of the cards will be upright and some of the cards will be reversed. I don't shuffle reversals into my decks most of the time. There is a time and a place where I enjoy working with reversed cards, but I think especially as a beginner, it just adds a whole lot and it can get really confusing really, really quickly. There is a really natural balance in the 78 tarot cards, right? You have cards that are quite positive. You have cards that can be a little challenging. You have cards that can really call you out on your crap. There are difficult cards in here as well as positive cards. And I think that natural balance exists for a reason, right? It sort of covers all the areas of life. Now, you do get even more meaning, I suppose, if you shuffle in reversals, because what people will do with reversals is if they pull a reverse card, they'll be like, oh, because it's reversed, it maybe means the like more negative or opposite or blocked or shadowy aspect of this card. So maybe where if the world upright were to mean completion, maybe the world in the reverse would mean something not completed, something stalling out, as an example. Now, the reason I don't necessarily work with reversals very often is because I often enjoy working with spreads that have fixed positions. So in my energy obstacle advice spread, for example, the energy is a just take the card as you see it sort of position, right? It's like, what is the energy of the situation, of the day, etc. The obstacle spread or the obstacle position operates as my reversal, if that makes sense. So whatever card I pull in the obstacle, I'm going to be looking at the energy of this card through the lens of how is this an obstacle? And then there's the advice card, right? Which I will also use as sort of the upright meaning. Does that make any sense? So if you're working with a tarot spread, you'll often find that tarot spreads already cover some cards will have positions that will be more upright or more positive sounding or more advice sounding or more neutral. And then there might be some positions that are like, you know, what do you need to overcome? What do you need to leave behind? And that's where you might look at some of those more shadowy aspects, right? So let's get into this. We're going to do a sample reading. So the reason I like the energy obstacle advice spread is because you can apply it as a general reading, which we're going to do. And then I'm also going to come up with some kind of made up question. And we're going to use the exact same spread to answer a question. But let's start for now with just a general. So this is the kind of thing I might do if I wanted to do a spread for the day, or I'm just feeling like pulling cards for myself or for a friend, but we don't really have a specific question. We just kind of want to see what comes through. Like, okay, what's the energy around me right now? What's the obstacle I need to look at right now? And what advice do the cards have for me right now? So it's very open. It's very general. And you'll find that if you read cards for other people, especially friends or family, that's usually what they're like, I don't have a question. I just want to like see what the cards say. This is a good one for that. And it's not so many cards that it gets overwhelming quickly. 3 cards is a really nice number, especially if you're just practicing and just getting to know what it's like to string cards together in a reading. So let's do it. And what I'll do is I'll talk through the spread and how I interpret it based on my knowledge of the card, but I'll also be sharing a little bit about what I see in the image in front of me and how that affects my interpretation. So if you feel like playing along, grab your favorite deck and just do the exercise with us. Why do I feel like I just shuffled in? Okay, I didn't. Okay, I feel like I just shuffled in reversals. Maybe because I was talking about it. I don't know. All right. So let's give it one more shuffle. I don't know why. I'm feeling the need to shuffle a lot. And we'll get started. So this is our general. Energy obstacle advice. All right. So I like to cut the deck before I draw my cards after I've shuffled. So our energy is our first position, and I like to lay all the cards out and then interpret. You'll find that some people, in fact, I'll just lay it out like that. Some people like to lay their cards out, 1, 2, 3, and lay them out face down. I used to do this a lot, actually. Lay them out face down and then turn them over one at a time and interpret them that way. That can help with overwhelm, particularly if you want to sort of look at each energy individually before you sort of look at the whole picture. I tend to enjoy looking at the whole picture because sometimes that gives me context I wouldn't otherwise have. But both methods are completely valid. This just happens to be the method that I like. So let's turn them all over. That's interesting because we were looking at that earlier. All right. Oh, that's another card we were looking at. That's really funny. I feel like that's really funny. I feel like these cards were showing up a little bit. So let's get zoomed in and let's just take a look at these 3 cards. So we have general. What energy is around me right now? So let's take a look at the sort of overall meaning for each card, and then we'll put it together into a cohesive reading kind of at the end. So in the first position for energy, we have the Emperor. So when I think of the Emperor, I think of things like stability, of control, of domain. Domain is a good word for the Emperor because he has a domain that he is in charge of. And keep in mind that I'm using gendered language for simplicity, but that doesn't mean that the Emperor has to be any particular gender or that gender has anything to do with the question. It's just my internal language. So the Emperor is somebody who is steadfast, who is strong, but also has a lot of weight on their shoulders, right? So if I'm thinking of this as the overall energy, I might look at, first of all, the concept of control, because I see the Emperor as somebody who has a controlling influence over people or over his life around him. So if I'm looking at this as like, what's going on? What's the energy around me right now? I'd be like, oh, well, first of all, things look pretty steady and stable. When I'm looking at this particular card, I'm really looking at the idea that there is this evergreen tree right in the center that seems very sturdy, very strong. It's kind of straight up and down. It doesn't look like it's too beaten down by wind or storms or anything like that. So I'm thinking stability. I'm thinking things are kind of under control, things look good. We're solid. It feels solid. And so if I was looking at this as the energy of a situation, like in my life right now, just in general, rather, if I'm looking at this as the general energy around me, like things are pretty good. Everything's under control. Things are kind of in alignment. Nothing's going super out of whack. So I'm feeling pretty good. I feel like this is like a general things are good kind of card to me. So again, I'm looking at it in a very general way because we didn't have anything specific for a question. We're looking at it for like generally what's going on. The second card, when we move over here, the Magician, represents our obstacle. Now, I'm going to think first about what I know the Magician could mean, and then I'm going to think about how that might show up as an obstacle. So the Magician card, to me, talks about or has an energy of manifesting, of being in your power, much like the Emperor kind of has that feeling of being in your power. But the Magician is somebody I feel like who has all of these tools at his disposal. So he has the sword, the pentacle, the wand, and the cup, the symbols of the 4 minor arcana suits. So he's got all of that like at his disposal, right? But more than that, he feels connected. Like he feels connected to something really divine, and he feels like one of the common sayings that's associated with the Magician, for example, is as above, so below. This idea that he can kind of draw down energy from above and manifest it into physical reality. That might be a little bit woo, but it's one of the things floating around in my head about the Magician at this particular moment. I'm looking at this really sort of fierce cat, wild cat. I'm really bad at, is this a leopard? I'm really bad, you guys, at animal identification, but regardless. And I'm looking at these rays of light behind him, and it just seems like he's sitting there kind of smug, like, oh, I got it. I'm good. This is fine. I can handle anything. And so right away I'm asking myself, how could that be an obstacle when everything seems like it's pretty stable and solid and all under control? And the first thing that jumps out at me when I say that, and I'm looking at this particular card and I'm thinking about that idea of like smugness and like having all your tools at your disposal, is maybe overconfidence. That's the first thing that pops out at me, is like, oh, well, maybe the obstacle in question in this general reading that I'm doing, maybe the obstacle in question is actually a sense of I'm fine. Like I can handle anything. I can make whatever I want happen. It's all good. Like nothing's going to throw me for a loop. So that's what jumped out at me. Now, there is a layer here of me working with my intuition and the meaning of the card to get there. But I'm thinking about how could this be getting in my way? Well, confidence isn't bad, but overconfidence could definitely present an obstacle, especially if I feel like everything's under my control and then I'm also feeling overconfident. That could definitely get me into some trouble, right? Or whoever I'm reading for. So that might be a warning or an obstacle I feel like could come out of the Magician card. And then we move to our final position, which is advice. And here we have the 8 of Swords. This is such an interesting 8 of Swords too, because we have in the 8 of Swords in, say, a traditional Rider-Waite-Smith or clone deck, we would see usually a figure kind of bound and blindfolded and surrounded by all of these swords. But here, interestingly, we have a butterfly just about to emerge from their cocoon, dangling from one of those swords and surrounded by swords, and they probably feel as if they can't uncurl their wings. But if they only realized that like they're more powerful than the obstacles around them, it could be amazing, right? And so right away, when I put this into context with the rest of the reading, I'm like, okay, everything seems to be under control, maybe some overconfidence. But then all of a sudden, when I look at the advice card, I get this feeling that this overconfidence is feeling like everything's under control. It's almost like it's covering up a deeper sense of vulnerability or fear. And that's what this kind of, to me, is sort of representing. There's a sense of overwhelm and of fear, like we want to be perceived like everything's good and under control. We're overconfident in the sense that we're like, I can handle whatever comes my way, but we're almost like not making any forward steps. Like we don't want to rock the boat, right? We just want to kind of have things stay as they are. We don't want to uncurl our wings and risk exposure or damage. So the advice card to me is saying, well, you're going to need to trust that when you open your wings, everything's going to be all right. Like, don't be overconfident. Don't think that like nothing can go wrong. Be aware of what dangers maybe lurk around you. But then also don't let those fears or those fears of danger kind of hold you back. And so I kind of almost feel like part of the message of this reading is about finding the middle ground between being cocky and like assuming everything will be fine no matter what, and letting fear or anxiety or lack of self-confidence actually hold you back. So it's like this person in this generic situation, maybe what I'm picking up on in this case is that this particular person is swinging wildly between either feeling like they need to be super confident, overconfident, nothing can go wrong, or they're frozen in place and they're not making any forward movement whatsoever. So I feel like the advice is, yeah, don't be overconfident, but don't be underconfident. Like, yeah, everything's nice and steady, but you still have to remember that you still have to stay humble. And you also have to remember that it's important to take some risks. That's kind of like what I got out of all of that. I hope some of you came along on the ride with me and got something out of that experience, but this is kind of how I read. I think about the image. I think about what this card makes me think of. I think about the card in context to the other cards, and I start to sort of build a bit of a story. And this is easier to practice on a smaller spread like this where you only have a few cards. So let's try this same idea, the same concept, but with a specific question. So let me think about a good sample question while I shuffle. Okay, let's say the question is, what do I need to know about my small business right now? Maybe the querent or the person or my friend or whoever who's asked for a reading has said, you know, everything seems fine, but I feel like there's something I might need to know. I'm not sure if I'm kind of considering whether to branch out in a new direction or keep things exactly as they are. Like, I don't know. And maybe I'm just jumping off like the last reading to come up with that, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. I was like, okay, let's say, and maybe it is a springboard from the last reading. Maybe that person's like, yeah, I think this is what it is. It's like, I can't decide if I want to just keep things on an even keel, like don't rock the boat, or if I actually want to, I should have zoomed out for this shuffle, but that's okay. Or if I want to like really take a chance and try something new. So it's like, okay, so this explains what I got from the previous reading. I'm just in my own world now. So let's see if we can do an energy obstacle advice specifically about the small business and find out what it is we need to know, or what my querent needs to know. Can you tell I like to shuffle a lot? I have a problem. I really enjoy shuffling. All right, so let's focus on this question. We'll do another 3-card spread. Energy, obstacle, and advice. Okay, so let's get zoomed in. Bring the cards down a little. So again, the question was about small business. Like, what do I need to know about my small business? What's going on? Like, what should I do? You know, I don't know. I threw out a bunch of things. So this is good because in this spread, we have a court card, a major arcana card, the Hanged Man. This was the Father of Swords or the King of Swords. And we have a minor arcana card, one of the numbered cards. So this is great because you'll get to see how these can all work together. So we're starting off with energy, and it's the Father of Swords. So especially when I'm asked a business question, I think about the strategic side of the Father of Swords because he's the guy, to me, that I can see planning out his moves very, very carefully, making sure that he knows what the consequence of each action is going to be to the best of his ability. He's very careful, he's methodical, he's strategic, he's also really, really smart. And so right away if I had somebody sitting across from me who'd asked about their business, I'd say, well, the energy around you says, you know, this is what I'm getting, is that you tend to approach your business in this very strategic way. There's nothing wrong with that. And strategic is not always overcautious. It's not necessarily that this person is not taking enough risks in their business. They're coming at things very strategically. And so to me, this would be very affirming that the energy around their business situation is that the strategy or the strategic way that they're approaching their business is helping them. It's supporting them. And I'm not seeing a problem with that based on the rest of the cards on the spread. Nothing else is jumping out at me. And I'll talk about that a little bit as we go through. So energy of the situation, King of Swords / Father of Swords in this deck. I see some strategy. I see the ability to wield power in a really mindful, clear way. The other thing you can look at around the sword suit, because it's the element of air, is things around communication and speaking ideas clearly. As the king of the suit of thought and communication, this card could indicate that our querent is pretty good at communicating their ideas, at clearly expressing what they do and don't want and what they do and don't need for their business. So that all feels pretty solid for me and is probably a pretty promising card from a business perspective, at least like just going off the cuff here. This middle card, remember, I'm going to be looking at sort of the shadowy aspect of this card and how it can present an obstacle. So right away, I feel like I understand what's going on because to me, the Hanged Man is about delays, setbacks, sacrifices. The Hanged Man is often a pause, right? Things are being put on hold. We're not moving forward. We're taking time to gain insight, perhaps by non-doing. There's an aspect of sort of pulling ourselves away. There's a suspension, right? Things are not moving. So how could that prevent an obstacle? Well, for somebody very, very strategic, this could be indicating to me that my querent has a habit of maybe procrastinating, maybe trying so hard to be strategic that they don't make those forward steps they need to take. They hang out too long trying to figure out the correct move, and they miss out on opportunities because of that. So that's my warning to my client, is like, or my querent in this case, is like, okay, I have the Hangman here as your obstacle, which tells me that you probably have a habit of, in your interest of being strategic, and this is good, like this serves you, the strategy and the strategic attitude and the ways in which you communicate around your business, these are all great things. But you can get in your own way and in your own head a little bit. And the Hangman to me indicates that maybe you hold back a little. Maybe you're spending a little too much time strategizing and not enough time making forward steps. So make sure you're not getting in your own way in this way. It's good to take careful, considered, measured, strategic steps in your business, but make sure that you're not, in the interest of being strategic, making no moves in your business. Does that make sense? So to me, this is like, okay, be strategic, be cautious, but don't hang out too long doing nothing, because that could be damaging for your business. That's what I get from those two cards interplaying with one another. And then we move to the advice card. And our advice card is the 9 of coins. Now, here's what stands out to me about the 9 of coins, or the 9 of pentacles, however you want to look at this. We have these 9 neatly arranged pentacles in the center of the card, and they're surrounded by feathers. And this makes me think of a nest, and the way that a nest is carefully built and then protected. And the 9 of Pentacles to me is about all the effort and time that has gone into building something, to putting all this careful work into it so that it will be built to last. When we build a nest, we need it to be safe and strong to protect the little baby birds, right? I'm sure there's other creatures that make nests, right? Not just birds. Anyway, point is, we want it to be sturdy, we want it to be strong, and so we do that effort carefully so that we can enjoy the security that that provides, right? And so to me, as the advice card, it's like, yes, make sure that your moves, make sure the strategic moves you're making are always with this ultimate end goal of long-term security and stability in your business in mind. In other words, when this querent was maybe kind of concerned they're not taking enough risks, my advice to them based on this particular reading is, no, I actually think that your measured, slow approach to your business is really helpful. I really think that being strategic, taking your time, and making careful, measured, planned steps is ultimately looking after the long-term success of your business, and that's a good thing. I would caution you, or this querent, I would caution you against being so strategic that you freeze up and you don't make movement. But as long as you're continuing to make forward progress and you don't find that you're like frozen and not making any decisions at all, I think you're probably already on the right track, because you're being strategic, you're taking your time, and you're building something that's built to last. So keep this focus on the ultimate longevity and enjoyment, long-term enjoyment of your business. Keep that at the forefront of your mind when you're making business decisions, and I think you're going to be all right. Right? So does that make sense? I know that I kind of got into it kind of deep with both of these readings, but I want you to see how something so simple like energy, obstacle, advice can give you a lot of room to play, and you start to look at each card and what each card could mean. But then I also looked at how these two cards were talking to each other, and I also looked at how all three were talking to each other. I thought about how the stability of the 9 of Pentacles played into the strategic movement of the Father of Swords. And I kind of looked at how the Hanged Man could represent an obstacle in that context, right? So it's all context. Again, this is just my approach. This is how I look at the cards. This is kind of how I begin to build these associations and these conversations. And again, if this feels overwhelming, if this feels like a lot, remember, I am starting with a base feeling for each card that I can draw on when I'm doing this. So if you don't have a good, strong base association for each card, even just a single word, definitely go check out Tarot with Training Wheels and build a base association. Know that like what each card kind of means to you energetically. And once you know that, you can begin to play like this, and it's going to build and it's going to expand, and you're going to get more confident with your readings. But I love 3-card spreads because I think they can be really powerful. And when I'm doing cards for myself, I very rarely do longer than a 3-card spread unless I'm doing something for a special occasion, or I'm pulling a spread somebody suggested because they said it was really cool, or like I'm doing like a Celtic cross because I really need to get in deep. But this is kind of how I approach my cards a lot of the time. And you will find there are a ton of fantastic 3-card spreads. And in fact, if you're watching this right now and you want me to do an episode of Learn Tarot or Learn to Read Tarot with me, if you want me to do an episode of this with your favorite 3-card spread or the one you hear about all the time, drop your requests down below. I am keeping a list of the spreads you guys want me to cover, the decks you want me to use in this series, all that kind of thing, and other requests for sort of bringing you into my brain with me while I kind of unpack a reading with you on camera. And that's kind of the point of this. Is I think there's a lot of resources out there, and I enjoy making resources for people who are brand new to tarot to kind of learn the meanings of the cards, but then learning to put it into practice is a whole other animal, and that's kind of what I want to do in this series. The other learning series that I have here on the channel is Troubleshooting the Tarot, which is a live stream series that I just started last month, I think. I will link that last one in the cards so you can check it out, or in the description box. But that was sort of a live Q&A where I can just kind of help people answer questions, or kind of like what's worked for me or what I think, or we can compare and contrast cards, that kind of thing. But I hope you see that whatever deck you're working with, particularly if you get to know it, even a deck that's got kind of pippish, that doesn't have a lot of action happening on the cards, there's still a lot to be seen. There's still a lot to work with, and you can begin to still build a story. This might not be the deck for you, but I guess I'm pointing out that building those associations over time by putting the cards through their paces will definitely help in that regard. So there you go, you guys. That was this episode of Learn to Read Tarot with me. I really appreciate you guys spending your time here, and it really, really helps my channel when you engage with the content that I put up. So if you found value in this video, if you enjoyed yourself today, then please do click the like button. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new here, and click the little bell if you want to be notified of all my future videos and my sometimes spontaneous live streams. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me, and may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye, guys.